Maar al 20 jaar eerder was de Benny Hill Show, toen nog in zwart-wit, het best bekeken programma op de Britse televisie. En Benny Hill een baanbrekende pionier.
Oh, Lucy went down on a farm, tried to milk a cow. Though she tried, she couldn't get the hang of it somehow. The farmer looked at Lucy and he murmured with a frown, well, now you just hang on tightly, gal, and she'll jump up and down. Oh, gather in buttons, put 'em in a pot.
He was witty, he was clever, he was inventive, he was a pioneer.
To make herself more beautiful, she thought she'd bathe in milk. She said, I'll have a bath full to her milkman, Jackie Wilk. He said, you want it pasteurized before I pour it in? She said, no, I'll be happy if it comes up to me chin. Oh, gather in.
He was born for the medium. He looked like a man who knew exactly, this is what I was meant to do.
Whoopie woe, every creamy milky woe.
He's decent and he's clean living.
Lots of people were under the impression that he was gay. In fact, he wasn't at all.
I only wish I could say the same about some of those little scrubbers that he knocks about with.
Position in the history of British comedy entertainment is pretty well unique.
Benny Hill's televisiecarrière heeft 35 jaar geduurd. In die periode beleefde hij grote successen, maar tegelijk riep zijn humor enorm veel weerstand op. In de pers werd hij wel seksistisch en racistisch genoemd. En hij stond bekend als iemand die buitengewoon gierig was. Maar zijn televisieshows brachten hem internationale roem en grote rijkdom. Hij was een komisch genie, groot geworden door de televisie. Hij werd in 1924 in Southampton geboren als middelste kind in het gezin Hill. Hij werd Alfred Hawthorne genoemd, net als zijn vader die een winkel had in medische hulpmiddelen.
Although it sold trusses and various dubious appliances, it mostly sold condoms. And that was how the family lived, in a way. It's nothing too terrible. They just, they lived off an income that basically came from selling French letters.
De familie Hill bezat een eigen huis. Echt arm waren ze niet, maar ze moesten wel zuinig doen.
Benny's parents were both very, very frugal. And I think they were just fearing of banks and institutions that might take their money from them. They were the real cash under the mattress family, which directly affected Benny's attitude to money and shaped his entire life, really.
Benny, die toen Alfie werd genoemd, had geen gelukkige jeugd.
His father was very strict. He was always had to be called the captain, and he frightened the life out of me, to be honest. But I think Alfie and Len both knew his father could be very violent, and I don't think Alfie was terribly happy there. His mother was a very kind, lovely person, Auntie Nellie, but she tended to put all in troubled water. She never solved any problems, she just pacified it.
She absolutely idolised him and he did her, and I think it probably gave him these very childlike tendencies that he probably got away with murder with his mum when she was alive, and I think that stayed with him throughout his whole life.
We used to play in the hall mainly, that was the biggest part of the house, and we could sit on the stairs and roll about on the floor. Mainly dressing up. Alfie was always cross-dressing. I don't know, mainly nothing sexual, just that he loved to dress up and act the part. And that was right for the very first time I ever knew him. But very happy days. But once the father came home, of course, it won't change completely. It was almost a feeling in the air that, watch out, and things could happen. It's very sad. Yeah, I found it sad.
I think of the two, I probably loved my mother more than my father. I was closer to my mother than my father. When my father died, I cried buckets, but not when my mother died. Perhaps I felt a bit guilty at not loving my father as much as I should have done.
Benny was een slim ventje, maar had een hekel aan school.
At the age of 12, Benny discovered going to the theatre. In particular, he discovered going to the variety theatre.
The comedian used to come on, he used to get more applause than anybody else. He was always surrounded by pretty dancing ladies, and the audience loved him. The fat women in the audience would go, "Oh, did you? Oh, what he said? Oh, isn't it awful? Oh," and applaud. And I thought, hey, he must get more money than anybody else because he's got top billing. Surrounded by beautiful girls, everybody loves him. That's for me.
Dromen mag, maar er moest ook gewerkt worden. Zijn eerste baan was in een winkel van Woolworth. Hij vond het een verschrikking. Daarna werd hij melkboer en in zijn vrije tijd speelde hij toneel bij een plaatselijke vereniging. Eerst nog even in het buurthuis van Islay, maar binnenkort in de Londense theaters.
He put himself on the train at Southampton and arrived at Waterloo with his suitcase, with his few meagre possessions, £20 in his pocket, and set off like Dick Whittington to find fame and fortune.
Zijn carrière was van korte duur. Het was 1941. Benny had een baan als toneelmeester, maar moest het leger in. Hij kwam bij het korps amusement, maar zijn grote kans kreeg hij pas na de oorlog als invaller voor Reg Varney.
I didn't have to teach him anything, it was already there. And he was a brilliant performer, there's no two ways. Well, the proof of pudding, isn't it? Look where he got.
Het werd een grote teleurstelling.
If you were a southern comedian and you went and played in the north, they hated you. And they would give you a very rough time. You were a soft southerner.
He went on this night and then suddenly I heard him clapping. I thought, oh boy, God, he's going well, you see. And then it's a funny sort of clapping because it was all together, you know. Oh, it's a terrible sound. And I thought, oh God, he's getting a slow hand clap, you know.
And he left the tour and he came back to London a bit of a broken man.
Theater en radio kregen concurrentie van een nieuw medium. Kon je vroeger met 1 act makkelijk een heel jaar langs de Engelse theaters trekken, voor televisie was er voortdurend nieuw materiaal nodig. Benny besefte dat en werd scriptschrijver.
As I wasn't doing terribly well as a performer, as a comic, I thought I'd try my hand at writing. So for 7 weeks I wrote a lot of sketches. I went in to see that jolly nice Ronnie Waldman, and who was head of light entertainment, and he said, what's all this about? And I said, well, there's a lot of sketches there. I think television's going to need material, and I don't want you to think I've chosen the best sketch and put it on the top. If you like, tell me, I'll flip through. You say stop, and I'll take that sketch out, and you can read that one. And he said, all right, go on, flip through. All right, stop, take it out. I took it out, and I handed it to him. He said, no, work it for me.
And the fella said to him, who do you think should do these? And he said, well, I don't know. He said, anybody, I just wrote them, anybody. He said, well, I think you should do them.
Benny Hill!
Zo begon Benny Hill's televisieloopbaan en al snel werd hij de ster van zijn eigen show. Die eerste shows werden live en met publiek uitgezonden en bevatten zang, dans en komische sketches. Kortom, variété. Benny was zo populair dat hij in 1954 werd uitgeroepen tot televisiepersoonlijkheid van het jaar.
It was quite the most remarkable thing because it was only about 3 years after he'd been chucked off stage at Sunderland, when basically the man said, you've got a rotten act. And now he was Television Personality of the Year. It was an incredible turnaround.
De televisie was het medium voor de komiek Benny Hill.
Yeah, definite. I think that's definite, yeah. It was through the television that my brother got into trouble in the first place.
Why was that?
He pinched a set.
The older comedians had had so many years doing stage work, they found it harder to adapt, obviously. But the Benny Hills and people and the Eric and Ernest, they knew less is better when you're in front of a camera.
It's Tingle's Television, the best in the West. Tingle's Television, the television service that never let you...
Even if you couldn't analyse it, you knew this was a creature of the medium. Yes, he was probably the first big, genuine television comedy name.
What he did was the camera captured him, and then he grew with his success as well. He loved television. That's the word I'm searching for. He didn't love theatre work, live theatre, but he loved television.
Other comedians who were big in the TV era to begin with had made their name on the radio or on stage, but Benny was not really a success in either sphere. But he was very big on television, and so he became known as the first comedian to be made by television.
Please don't blame our doggy, it's not his fault at all. Someone left a wet umbrella standing in the hall.
He always got the best value out of anything we wrote. He was a great performer. And if you gave him some good material, he really did get the utmost out of it.
All leading washing machine manufacturers recommend Buzz. Yes. No matter what your washing machine, Buzz is the right soap powder for you. Buzz is right behind. No, I didn't know she was coming.
It was very clever the way he built the shows up, because although there were sketches, there was some dancing and there was some singing and a bit of solo stuff for him. That was the pattern of every show. But within that pattern, which might seem constricting, he was able to inject infinite variety.
A very good example of Benny's inventiveness on the BBC in his early days is a spoof he did of Jukebox Jury.
Let's see what the panel thought of that one. Lady Edgware.
Well, I liked it. It was gay, it was vivacious, and it had a most wonderful beat going all the time there.
Leave the gasometer.
Well, I liked it. I thought it was nice. I like the back in. And the front in. The two side ins.
Ted Crumble.
Well, I found it most exciting.
He played all four members of the panel, and no one had seen anything like it. This was brilliantly inventive television. This was literally pioneering. I mean, it completely flummoxed viewers at home. How could one man be on screen 4 times at the same time? Completely normal today, where we're used to every trick in the book. But in those days, 40 years ago, that was very special.
We were both a bit obsessed with the 30s. We used to always try and do sort of send-ups of 1930s films, you know, where everybody spoke terribly well.
It's me, Rudy.
Rudy, come in, Rudy.
Hi, but it's good to see you again after all these years. Oh, Mitzi, I've missed you so.
Do you like my little home?
It's charming.
There's a lovely view from this window. Rudy, what's come over you? I've never seen you like this before.
I'm sorry. When you told me about Dick, everything went black. There, is that better?
Much better.
Perhaps I'd better leave.
No, don't go, Rudy. It's raining outside.
Is it? It's not, you know. Just look out there.
Met sketches als deze had Benny de televisie veroverd. Maar hij wilde meer. En begin jaren 60 mocht hij van de BBC een comedyserie maken.
Night I've dreamt of holding you like this.
The first one was Portrait of a Bridegroom, which was really inspired by Japanese film Rashomon, where everybody gives a different account of a murder, I think. And this was a different account of a wedding.
You know, Angela, there comes a time in every man's life when he gets terribly bored with being a bachelor.
Yes, Mervyn.
Angela, would you consider...
Yes, Mervyn.
Do you think you could consent to be my...
I want you by me, lovely violet. Oh, go away.
Angela.
Benny speelde 4 versies van de bruidegom. De rijke romanticus, de onvolwassen puber, de vieze oude man en de voddenman.
How about a little kiss then, eh?
Oh, no, Mervyn, darling, really not in front of Mumsy.
Oh, I mean, after all, we are engaged, aren't we?
Are you?
Oh, I should hope so. After what happened last Saturday night in the woodshed, eh?
Well, was quite successful, but it never really took on with the public. I don't know why.
De Benny Hill Show daarentegen was het best bekeken programma met meer dan 15 miljoen kijkers per aflevering. Benny had de top bereikt en zocht een nieuwe uitdaging.
He gave great value, Benny. You know, in one sketch you might see a whole day's work. And the BBC were always prepared to give him that license because they knew that he was an award winner. You know, he was someone that belonged on the BBC. And it was a tremendous shock for the BBC when he upped and went to ITV. They could not understand it at all.
In 1969 tekende Benny Hill een contract bij Thames Television.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's the Benny Hill Show. And here is Benny Hill.
Bij Thames ontmoette hij de man die zijn beste vriend zou worden.
I went to the rehearsal room one day for my first day's rehearsal with the cast. And Benny was in the corner doing a Marcel mime very badly. All like that. Pretending and really over the top, very camp, sort of the man trapped in a balloon kind of thing. And he was down the other end, just doing it all on his own. And I fell about laughing because it was so funny. And he looked round and he went, I don't know who he is, but we'll keep him. And we became sort of friends, as it were, ever since. I think Benny's favourite character was probably Fred Scuttle, who was one of his very original ones. Hello, viewers. What was we on? I didn't realise. Yeah. Oh, Fred believed everything he did was right. Absolutely everything. And of course he wasn't. He was an idiot.
Thank you, Dame Edith. That was delightful. You and Sir Michael go and have a coffee, and I'll deal with...
Benny Hill werd door zijn collega's bewonderd omdat hij steeds weer met nieuwe dingen kwam.
Hello, viewers. I had no idea we were on, sir.
I saw Ben do something. It was one of the most magical afternoons in my life. We'd all done the filming in the morning, and we'd been to the canteen to have something to eat. And I popped back to see what time the call was in the next morning. And Ben was in a clown costume. And I thought it was wonderful. Best thing I've ever seen him do.
In 1971 veroverde Benny Hill zelfs de hitparade met een liedje over zijn vroegere dagdromen als melkboer.
They wanted him on Top of the Pops. And he said, no. He said, I'm too old to be on.
It comes up to me chest and that tickled old Ernie. You know, I just love all that kind of, that voice that Benny used to do. And it's so sweet because, I mean, Benny's comedy is all about he never got the girl.
I was Two-Ton Ted from Teddington. That was it. It's a terrific song. It makes tickle me. And people still like to hear it.
It's a quintessential Benny Hill, really. But at the same time, he's really on top of it. You know, it's like it's all done in 2.5 minutes and it's inventive. It's good, you know. I think it's a very...
Met de Benny Hill Show een kijkcijferkanon in huis. Dat bovendien moeiteloos doorverkocht kon worden aan Amerika, aan Nederland en de rest van de wereld.
Benny Hill became a huge star in America without trying. And he just sort of, it just happened to him. He didn't even want to be a star in America. He didn't even want to sign the contract.
You didn't have to even understand them. I think some of the times nobody, and I couldn't understand the language, but visually his comedy was there. And that helped them internationally, and it's helped them in the States.
Suddenly, in comes these millions of pounds that he didn't ask for and certainly didn't need.
Benny didn't believe it. He believed the checks that started coming through the door, which were enormous, and so did the artists, because they were getting repeat fees and things. And then it became ludicrous because he couldn't go anywhere. And when Benny and I went to America, it was ludicrous. I mean, he was mobbed in the streets. He was mobbed in New York, in a restaurant. They all stood up and cheered. And in France, he couldn't walk up the street because people would just go raving mad.
It mattered not to Benny how much he had in the bank. It was almost an embarrassment to him. What could he possibly do with all that money? And the really sad thing is that the answer was nothing.
Ondanks al zijn rijkdom woonde hij in een bescheiden huurflat in Teddington op loopafstand van de televisiestudio.
There was a sofa and 2 armchairs, and I thought, this is extraordinary. There's nothing in here at all. There was an old-fashioned radiogram and a television set, and these 3 pieces of furniture, and nothing else.
Benny was never a homely person. The home didn't mean anything to him at all. As far as he was concerned, it was a roof over his head, and as long as he had a comfortable bed and a cooker and a TV, and I think in order of preference, the TV probably came top of the list.
He just didn't need very much in his life. And I think it goes right back to his childhood, where quite clearly his parents didn't need much in their life either. They could be content with very little. And Benny was the same.
De pers kreeg belangstelling voor Benny's privéleven.
This multi-millionaire, worldwide star was just an ordinary bloke who would talk about football or picking up his laundry or going shopping or let's you and I go and have a beer or anything. And people couldn't understand, or still don't understand, I don't know why, that he was just an ordinary bloke.
How much would you have liked if I could have afforded that?
£18.40.
£18.40, God dear. Some days it don't pay to get up, does it?
How was your trip to the Bahamas?
Absolutely splendid, and had a lovely week afterwards in Switzerland.
Very nice too.
Oh, isn't it warm? Isn't it warm nowadays? Oh.
I think he never thought above earning £10 a week. And his budget was trimmed to that.
We went on a bus together and he got a Sainsbury's bag. He had a hat on and his glasses. And nobody noticed him. And I actually presumed to say, you know, why do you get buses, you know? And he said, but they go to the end of my road.
You can only wear 1 shirt at a time, 1 pair of trousers at a time. You only eat 1 meal at a time. If I pop over to Paris, which I do occasionally, and I've got a lot of money with me, what am I going to do with it? I can stay at a nice hotel, I can go to the Olympia or the Bobino Music Hall and see a show. The most I can pay is about £20 for a seat. I'm on a permanent diet. I can't dine at Maxim's every night, much as I'd love to. Not because of the money, but because of this that travels around with me.
He didn't have a car. He never drove. We'd get taxis if he took me out. You'd always go somewhere nice, but never a really upmarket place. He'd go somewhere where he liked the ambience, where he liked the food.
And they say, why doesn't he drive in a car? Because I'll get the pudding off, Dan. I'll get the pudding off, see if I walk. I need to walk from Teddington to Kingston and then Richmond. It's about 6 miles along the riverbank. And think, I've lost a lot of weight here. Also, you then have 4 Mars bars, which would put all the weight back on.
Have you had your dinner? We've had ours.
I never once ever saw him lose his temper. I never heard him once raise his voice. And I was with him over 20 years. His most equable temperament.
I'll just have my usual Times and the Herald Tribune.
And your Mayfair and your men only have arrived for you.
Ooh, that's cut. That's nice. I've never... Cut!
A laugh did everything for him. It covered every emotion. So you could never really work out, you never knew Benny. That's what I'm trying to say. You actually, I don't think anybody really knew Benny.
I would say he was a contented man. I think you could say he was happy. But the thing is, people could never understand this because he wasn't a conventional fella. I mean, he was always happy to see you, always happy to talk. But he was essentially, I mean, it's a terrible cliche and a sort of a silly word in many ways, but a loner.
And me kissing you like this. And like this.
Het feit dat Benny Hill alleen woonde en zich met mooie vrouwen omringde, maakte nieuwsgierig. Daar kwam nog bij dat hij zijn medespeelsters bij hem thuis auditie liet doen.
He was this kind of almost like a playboy. That Benny had these women around him, and who quite knew what went on. He loved the idea that there was a sort of talk about Benny and those women. What do you think goes on? What are they up to when they go up there for auditions at his flat? What are they doing?
This is the last bottle. That 20 gallons you got through since last Thursday.
The only way he would meet ladies would be through the show, which of course he did. And then he would then date them separately, take them to lunch, always to lunch, and then back for champagne and whatever. And because he had to watch telly in the evening, you see. That's how important ladies were in his life.
Now people say in Athens I am one romantic fool. I fell in love with my teacher when I was at school, but I knew our love could never be. She could not be mine, for she was nearly 23. I was 39. So come, my pretty Greek girl, come and dance with me. Oh, shine upon me as the golden sun shines on the sea. Fill my lonely, eager, empty arms with ecstasy. Oh, come, my pretty Greek girl, come and dance with me. No,
he kept his private life private, and that's probably why there's so much speculation about it now.
They've got to pick on something, the popular press, so therefore they would, in the same way that they would, I'd come in the morning and say, oh, have you seen the paper? And he said, oh, what am I today? Am I a comic genius or a dirty old man? And I'd say, you're a dirty old comic genius. Oh, good. Because they make it up as they go along. They couldn't understand. Well, it's not that they couldn't understand. That's nonsense, really. If you're bachelor and you're rich, why aren't you married? Why do you have to get married? Benny couldn't understand that, as he would say. Why buy a book when you can join a library?
Because he got into drag, dressed up as a woman a lot, lots of people were under the impression that he was gay. In fact, he wasn't at all gay. Well, he actually loved, more than anything, being surrounded by women, beautiful women.
I don't know where that came from, actually. I really don't know where that came from. He used to laugh about it, actually, but I know a lot of gay people. I'm usually pretty quick at picking that sort of thing up, and I don't believe it.
Just turn the old light off there, innit?
It's done to me.
Oh,
What
sorry
are you
about that.
turning off the light for?
Well, on account of the wrestling.
Oh, but there won't be no wrestling on the telly tonight.
I know, but there will be on the sofa tonight.
The way as I understood it, by and large, it was perfectly straightforward. I mean, he loved women, but he didn't want one, one of his own.
Dat hij beslist niet wilde trouwen is niet helemaal waar. Hij genoot van zijn vrijgezellenbestaan, maar soms had hij ook wel eens een zwak moment.
I always knew that he was fond of me. And then one day I do remember, and this has come up, actually at his flat in Queensgate, where he did sort of ask me to marry him. I don't know what I said, but obviously I was sort of saying no, but not really knowing whether he was sincere or not, whether this was a real thing, because always on his face was this little tiny smile, and he had this little tiny smile ready to break into, and of course the minute he knew I was saying no, it became a funny thing, and it became, and so then I was again thrown into this thing of, well, he didn't really mean that, did he? And so we laughed about it.
Arthur was shattered. Life without Edwina was unthinkable. He decided to end it all. But he couldn't even do that right.
Hoewel hij zelf geen kinderen had, genoot hij van de kinderen van vrienden en collega's.
I think having come to my home and seen how Benny was with my children, I do deep down feel that Benny would have made a wonderful father, and he would have loved to have had children on his own. My situation suited him because he could come to my home, he could be a family man, he could play with the kids, he could have all the kids' outings, but then he could love and leave us. He could go away and he could then become Benny Hill, the man on his own.
I remember when Adam was about 4, he was at a playgroup in Esher, and Benny had come to stay for 2 or 3 days, and he said to Adam, "What would you like to do tomorrow, Adam?" And he said, "I'd like you to come down to playgroup and meet my teachers." And I said, "Oh, don't be silly, Adam, Uncle Benny doesn't want to do that." The next morning we got up and Benny was all dressed up in his suit. I said, "What are you doing up?" He said, "I'm coming to playgroup." So off we went down to playgroup, and the teachers, their faces, he was doing the business to the teachers and to roughing the kids and going, you know, doing the whole Benny Hill thing. And they seemed to know who he was, the children, even though they were so young. I mean, amazing, really, isn't it? He was great. I couldn't believe that he did it.
He was free to do whatever he wanted to do, but then he had a substitute family that he could go out, take out for days when it suited him.
De Einzelganger Benny Hill kon altijd bij zijn vrienden terecht en voelde zich dan doorgaans heel snel thuis.
You do whatever you want. You're my guest. I'll let you do whatever you want. You can lay it in the morning. The kids can bring you a cup of coffee and some biscuits. Oh, I'll have biscuits. Well, he had the whole packet of biscuits on a plate in his bedroom, and that was his breakfast. Is this little boy coming out? He was childlike, like dunking his biscuits and, "Oh, this is nice," and then I'll get up, "What's on telly?" And, "Oh, have you got a beer?" And he'd have the beers lined up by the side of the chair and eating bags of crisps, popcorn, sweets. He'd rather eat that than have a meal. In fact, when I actually gave him a meal, he couldn't eat it. It was too much for him. He said, "I'm not used to eating big meals because I dish proper dinners on a full-size dinner plate." And he'd look and he'd say, "Oh, you give me a big dinner. I can't eat all that," because he'd be stuffing his face with sweets and rubbish. But it's all childlike, isn't it? It's like a little boy saying, "I can't eat my dinner, Mummy, because I've just eaten a bag of sweets."
"Little heart, would you like to come for lunch?" "Oh, right, Benny, that'd be lovely, thank you." And you'd get there and he'd be pottering around in the kitchen, and then it would be fish fingers and a tomato or tin corn or something like. It was always something really awful. I mean, he'd take you out for dinner, don't get me wrong. It wasn't being mean or anything. It's just that that's the sort of thing he could cook. And then he'd put on old movies like Laurel and Hardy, and Charlie Chaplin was a favourite. And we'd sit and watch old movies, and he'd have tears rolling down his face from watching, you know, because you know how moving some of the Chaplin movies were. He'd be in tears. You know, it would really, really upset him.
I've never loved anyone else.
You know what day it is today?
Benny was not into designer labels or anything at all. That meant nothing to him. As far as Benny was concerned, if he could get a bargain, that actually made him happy. It was not the fact that he couldn't afford to, it was just the fact that he thought, "Oh, just because I've got the money to buy doesn't mean that I'm going to feel any better or any happier by wearing a more expensive shirt or expensive trousers than wearing cheaper ones."
He would have a beautiful suit, and he'd wear the top half of one suit and the bottom half of the other one. And I'd say, "You look ludicrous. You've got brown and green. It doesn't work." And he'd say, do you know how much this suit costs? I said, "No, yeah, but in one hit, it doesn't work, Ben." And because he was the worst dresser in the world. He had the same pair of brown shoes that he wore. If you watch the shows carefully, you'll see he's got these brown shoes on, no matter who's playing.
Regarding the writing of a show, I always have, I don't now because I'm being interviewed, but I normally have a pocket here or somewhere with a pencil and a piece of paper. And I travel around quite a bit, and I'm sometimes perhaps in a French restaurant, and I get an idea, and I get a little notebook out, and I start writing. And the service usually improves, because the waiter thinks that I'm perhaps Egon Rene or somebody, you know, writing up about the service in the restaurant.
He did write, but he also pilfered. A lot of this business of going around the French cabaret clubs and the circuses and nightclubs that he did whenever he went abroad was to find a source of comedy material that other people had not stumbled upon. And because he could speak pretty good French, he could translate them into English and bring them back and do them on British television.
Most of the Benny Hill show scripts came in, you had to get used to it. It came in from bits and pieces all over the world. We get postcards, you get things written on the back of envelopes, and we had to decipher it. And me, I say me, but the PAs usually. Then when he came home from his summer off, we would then put it into some kind of order, and he himself would give you the exact order of what to shoot and how the first show should look.
All of his shows in those days were what we would class as postcard humour. Do you know what I mean? Like, your dumplings are bubbling over, love, that kind of thing, which I personally didn't find offensive, but obviously later on, people began to find those kind of remarks offensive.
But it became a little repetitive, and also no woman was allowed to appear on the programme unless she had most of her clothes removed. And it just kind of got out of date and out of fashion.
Mary Whitehouse started writing letters saying that it's the thin end of the wedge, basically. If we allow this kind of smut on our television, where does it end? By the 1980s, Benny was beginning to look like a bit of a relic from a distant age.
And everyone has a separate point at which, that kind of humour stops being funny. And for me, it was kind of after I'd seen it once.
Maar vooral door de eindeloze herhalingen kreeg het publiek genoeg van hem.
Every comic has only got so many tricks. And if you see them too often, you're looking at the mirror shining behind the conjurer, so you can see how he takes the rabbits out the hat,
It was never the idea to have loads of Benny Hill on every week. It was never the idea. It was meant to be something very special, about 3 times a year. But then success breeds repeats, is what success breeds.
Benny's looking older. Benny's looking fatter. Benny's got these girls doing fairly tawdry, unfunny things. Benny's still a funny man, but he's in dire need of a change of direction. It doesn't look right for a 65-year-old to be chased by 20-year-old women in bikinis. It just looks wrong.
Het hoofdamusement van Thames Television nodigde hem uit voor een gesprek. Niets vermoedend wandelde Benny Hill van zijn huis naar de Teddington Studios.
And I really got quite a surprise. I went in at 10 o'clock. I think I came out at about 2 minutes past 10.
It was an enormously difficult decision to take an institution off the screen. The main reason, in fact there were 3, the audiences were going down, the programme was costing a vast amount of money, and the third reason was that it was looking a little tired.
He said to me, I was in and out of the building in 20 minutes. He was just asked to come in for a chat, the contract coming up and whatever. And when you think of the money he'd made them.
I called him into the office, and I was quite bored about it because there's no way you can dress up bad news. And just told him, quite frankly, that I wasn't going to renew his contract. And he looked at me and said, fine. He said, does that mean forever? I said, no. He said, we could have done this over a lunch. And I said, I don't think that would have been appropriate. He nodded, said, yes. And then he got to his feet and walked out the door.
He was hurt. He was very badly hurt.
Business is business, and I don't mind, them saying, we've had enough, or we can't afford it, or whatever. But I would have liked a little bit of a small pat on the back, because I'd been there for 22 years.
And we walked up the high street, and he said, what we're going to ask you, just calm down. And as we were walking up the high street, he said, I asked you a question. I said, yeah. He said, am I sort of like Thames's biggest star? And I went, yeah. And he said, do I sell all over the world and all of that? I'm the biggest sell? I said, yeah. And he said, have I just been sacked? And I said, yeah.
Now, whether the show should have been cancelled or not, that's Thames' prerogative. I think it was wrong, but the way they did it to someone that was there for over 20 years, who was the backbone of some of their shows, I thought was horrible. And in effect, what he was doing was 3 1-hours a year. Now, if you take 3 1-hours out of a full year, that's small potatoes. If you don't like that show, we don't have to chop his head off. We don't have to cause this. Try to do it in as nice a way as possible. And that was not the way they did it. That's what I have fault with.
When his contract was allowed to run out, he basically went to pieces. Because if he couldn't make his television show, and if he couldn't appear in public with these beautiful women, then what was his life?
It really is like a mother losing her child. Benny had lost his baby. His life was his show. And he lived for it night and day. And that's all he could think of. So if he didn't have a show to write, he had nothing to do. And it completely changed him as a person. Not necessarily to me or his friends, but the twinkle had gone from his eye. The fun had gone. The expectancy of starting to shoot in September in the freezing cold and all of that had gone. And his life was empty.
Zijn carrière in Engeland was voorbij. Maar in de rest van de wereld kwam er nog lang geen eind aan zijn succes. Hij werd zelfs door de familie van Charlie Chaplin uitgenodigd in diens Zwitserse huis om een onderscheiding in ontvangst te nemen.
We went to the house for lunch one day, and they took us and they said, we're the first people, Benny and I, outside of family, who'd ever been allowed into Charlie Chaplin's study. And now, Chaplin to Benny was God, absolute God. And we went into the study, and Eugene, his son, said, this is his dad's desk. And Benny sat at Charlie's desk, and he cried. Because it was, to him, it was like meeting God. And I was looking around the room, and there was his telly and his armchair and this beautiful garden. And I said, come here, come here. And he came across, and there on the video shelf was Benny Hill, Benny Hill, Benny Hill, and he went, wow. And Eugene said, well, my dad was your biggest fan.
C'est un très grand honneur pour moi. Et je vous souhaite merci beaucoup.
Maar Benny Hill was passé.
Merci, Benny.
When you're sad and you're on your own, what do? You eat more, you pick, and you start to drink, and that's exactly what Benny did. And by continuing that sort of lifestyle, he didn't help his health condition at all. It actually just made matters worse.
What he did instead, he ate. And he really ate himself to death because he did nothing but eat.
He started having heart trouble within less than 3 years after last working for Thames Television. He had his first heart attack. It was really no coincidence. I think if he had had the motivation to keep himself in trim and to keep healthy, then he wouldn't have allowed that to happen. And the really sad aspect of it is that he was offered a bypass and basically told that if he didn't have the bypass, he would die. And he said, no, I won't have it. In a sense, he was signing his own death warrant.
He told me when I got him home that he'd been offered a bypass, but he said they said it because of his age or whatever, he was only 70% sure of it working. And I nearly killed him because I would not have let him out of the hospital if I'd known he was going to have a bypass. Because these days, a bypass is easy peasy, and he would have still been with us. And then one Saturday, I phoned him and nothing happened. And I was very concerned. And then I phoned him later on. I thought, oh, maybe he's gone out for a little stroll or something. And then that evening I phoned him again. I thought, well, maybe he's gone away. Maybe he's gone to stay with Sue or something like that. And then the next day, I phoned again and I got nothing. And then later on during, and I was worried, but later on during the day, the neighbours phoned and said they could hear the TV. And it had been on all night and all of that. And it was early evening by then. So I said, okay, I'm coming down. So I went down. and I knocked on the door, and I was going to bash the door in, but I thought, no, because perhaps he's asleep or something, you know, and he'll kill me if I knock his door in. Anyway, they got a ladder, this terrible ladder, and Benny's terrified of heights, and I'm not at my best. And they plonked this ladder up, this old ladder up against the flat 2 floors up, and it finished before the balcony like that, so you had to go out to get in. And I got up it, and it was shaking and windy. And I remember looking down at them, and I said, if he's died on me, I'll kill him, which he would have liked. And I climbed over the balcony, and there he was, on his couch, with the telly blaring away, and he was dead. And the police were wonderful, and they organised everything. And I said, please, his beautiful hair was all sticking up. I said, can I smooth his hair down? And they said, yeah, okay. So I smoothed his hair down, and I gave him a little kiss, and I went. And it was awful. It's an awful sight, somebody who's died like that. And he'd been dead for a couple of days. And then they zip him up in a bag, and this big fella was suddenly very, very small and very tiny. And I thought, you know, there's one of the greatest comedians in the world just being taken out in a plastic bag. And he looked so small. And I really cried, but it was because it was such a waste. And it didn't have to happen.
2 days after the death of Frankie Howerd, fans are mourning the death of another great comic, Benny Hill. He died of a heart attack at his flat in southwest London. Benny Hill's career spanned decades. His blend of slapstick and innuendo had endeared him to millions. He was a cult figure in the United States and Japan, although his television show in Britain had been dropped after criticism that his style was sexist.
Everyone named in his will had died by the time he died, and he knew it. And he never changed his will. So all the friends got nothing, and the family, nieces and nephews with whom he had very little, if any, relationship, got £7 million between them.
For such a big star, worldwide, he was the most ordinary bloke I've ever met. And we all loved him for it.
Oh, he was the best. He was the top. In my mind, he was the best.
And like a swing, Edwina's affection went to and fro. Should she marry George? Or should she marry Arthur?
I think he would want to be remembered as a man who caused a lot of laughter. And there's no crime in that.
Benny Hill is forever, and he will be shown forever all around the world.
Let's go.